go ahead and record from here. Perfect. So yeah, let's see what you all have. Let me pull this up here. And bring this up. Okay, questions. What questions do you have about higher order components? Anything that we can review for the first part of today before we jump into our lesson? Hey, good question. Yes, it does take a lot of work. But you know what? That's part of being a developer. I have not stopped learning in the time that I have been doing this. So one thing that's really cool about programming is that we are constantly learning and constantly there's always new things coming out. So there's constantly things that we're learning and getting better at. So yeah, always working hard. Okay, so here's a good question. How does local storage work? I got my username, password inputs working with a sign in, sign out button, but it doesn't save info. Yeah, we can take a look at that. Okay, let me see if we can pull this up. All right, hold on 1 second. Let's see here. Hey, here we go. This looks familiar. Okay, I've got that in. Okay, so I'm going to pull this open in a new window, and we'll just close this. All right, so this is the Instaclone project. This doesn't have the new pictures, the new data that Ben sent out with pictures, but that's okay. We don't need pictures. So let's open up local storage. We're going to clear everything, refresh the page, and we should be at our login page. Ah, nice. Okay, so let's go check out what makes this login page work. So whenever I see a form like this and I want to figure out what's happening in the code in this kind of a thing, I'm going to go to the component that has the button, because we know it's clicking this button that's going to run something, right? That event is what triggers the function and runs the logic behind this form. So let's go find where this button is. Okay, so here's my button. When we click on the button, we invoke handle login submit. So let's go see what handle login submit does. So first thing it does is create a user and creates a user from this.state.username. So we're just grabbing whatever we type into the form here under username. Then it sets the user to local storage. So when we run local storage.setItem, this function takes in two arguments. The first argument is the key for this key value pair, and the second argument is the value. So this is the key, this is the property that we're trying to set to local storage, and this is the value of that property. So when we type something into username and click login, we're going to see up here the key of user and then the value of whatever we typed in to the field. So this is the key that we see right here on this column. And then whatever we've typed in is the value. And then this just refreshes the page, and I'll show you why we're doing that here This is not how we would normally do things because we don't want, the whole point of building a React application is not to have to reload the page. But this is just a way to get our higher order component to run again, check local storage, and then show the post data. So first of all, let's go to that point. We're going to click this button. We're going to watch local storage, set a user to local storage, and then the window will reload. So I'm going to type in something. There we go. For this one, don't even need a password. So we're going to click login, and there is my user and the value that I typed in. So now, where is this being used, and how is it affecting what I see on the page? For that, we have to go to our app.js and take a look at this situation right here. So what is conditional view? Conditional view is this that we set up right here, this constant variable. So what is this variable? What's the value of this variable? Well, we have to look at this higher order component, and we have to see what's returned from calling this higher order component and passing in two components. So if we go to authenticate, what is returned? What's after the last arrow of this function? Well, it's a class component. So a component is returned out of this function. So here, when I call this function and pass in two components, then conditional view gets the value of that class component. So we basically, it's as if we had come here, copied this class component, and pasted it right there. So conditional view equals this class. So what is this class doing when I render it here? Well, just like any other component that we write, if we're rendering that component inside a component, we can go to that component and look at what it's rendering, look at what the return is out of that component. So that component, again, is, I keep clicking on tabs. That component, again, is this class component. Ignore everything else around it right now. What we're looking at when we, dang it, I did it again. What we're looking at when we render this right here is this class right here. Okay, so ignore everything else around it. We just want to focus on what this class is doing. So let's take a look at this class. A couple things that we notice are we've got a constructor with state, and this state has a logged in property set to false. When the component mounts, remember our flow, we're going to run our constructor, then render, then component did mount. So here's our constructor. Let's jump to render. When this first renders, this is false, and so we skip this return and we go to this return here. So when this first renders, we rendered the login page, then component did mount runs, and let's see what component did mount does. So we just do a simple if-else check. If local storage.getItem and grab the item user, if this is falsy, so if there's nothing in local storage called user, then we keep logged in on state as false. Else, if there is something in local storage under the key user, then we're setting our state to true. Okay, so we run set state, this changes, which causes render to run again. Now this .state.loggedIn is true, And instead of returning login page, we now return post page. So when this gets toggled, when this starts out false, we can basically take login page and post it right here. And that's what's happening inside conditional view. When there's no user key in local storage, we're basically rendering login page right here. After we log in and we set a user item on local storage, then we're returning this instead of this. So at that point, we've done that. And we're now rendering post page instead of login page. Does that help with the local storage things? The two pieces of local storage that we're working with are set item, where you pass in a key, a string as a key, and then some data, and get item, where you access that value by passing in the same key. Okay, cool. Wow, lots of conversation. Yay, good. Can I say I understood HFC more than I understood the beginning, React in general? That's awesome. When should something be considered a component? Like, is there a list of a set list of common components that are all similar sizes code-wise? I'm trying to get a better understanding. So it's not necessarily like the amount of code that's in a component. You can have tiny components, you can have huge components. Something is a component when, that's a really good question. So a component is a piece of UI that we've been given a design spec. We're told to go build this page or build this feature. And we break that design spec down into small pieces of UI that we want to display to the screen. So when you write a class or a function that returns some JSX like this, or some JSX like this, when you write a class or a function that is rendering something on the DOM, in other words, it's going to return some JSX code, that is a component. That's different than something like, oftentimes you'll see like a utils folder, and then you'll see something like, oh, let's do this. Let's go into here, and let's copy this. And in our utils folder, we're going to make a function or a folder called checkoff.js. And we'll write a function, check off. Doesn't have to take anything in. We're going to return, let's see, false if we're not logged in. If we are logged in, we'll return true. And then we'll export this out of this file. Okay, so here's a function that all it does when we invoke check off, it's going to check local storage, and it's going to return false if there's not a user on local storage, and return true if there is. So there's shorter ways to write this. We could do this as a one-line arrow function pretty easily, but we'll just keep it like this to not be confusing. So then we go back to our authenticate, and we import check off from // utils check auth. Now we can do this. So we've got this logic in this function that we just imported. So we can say this.set state. We want to set the state for logged in. So what we do is we check auth and we run check auth. So we run this function, it's going to return true or false, and it's going to set our state to true or false depending on if we're logged in. Now I don't want to muddy the waters by any means with this example. What I want to show you is that you will have files and folders that are not components. So this is an example of a file that we created that has a function, but this function is not a component. And we can see the difference here. This is just a regular JavaScript function that you were writing for weeks in the first unit. And something like this is a component where it's actually building something to be rendered on the DOM. So there are a lot of cases, I think your question is really great because there are a lot of cases where you'll see a file like this that with functions that are not, or classes even that are not components. So this app component is a component even though when you dig down into conditional view and to post page and login page and all the things that get rendered inside those other components, they're not rendered here. This just kind of wraps everything that could possibly be rendered in this app. This is still a component. The same as the most fundamental small piece of UI, like a comment or a comment input. Okay, awesome question. Thank you. Let's see. This is more used, well, yes. Yeah, this is used with hawks, but also with render props. We'll get into this next week, so don't worry about this syntax. We're going to see that next week. Okay, can you assign an object right into local storage, something like set item? Yeah, absolutely. That totally works. If you need that value, if you need this back from local storage, you have to, it's set to local storage as a JSON object and not a JavaScript object. So when you get item user data, if you need to use that data, and so you go grab it with get item, you have to parse that back into a JavaScript object from JSON. So a little bit tricky there if you're actually using local storage, not just to see if something exists on local storage, but to actually use the value, then you'll have to run json.parse around this whole function call here and parse this value into JavaScript. Yes. Oh my goodness, this is a great point to bring up. Thank you, Oscar. Let's see. I think this goes back to what we were talking about last week, where when we first started, I addressed the fact that through the things you'll learn in this unit are, you get 1 or 2 passes at all this new material, and that gives you an introduction to React and an introduction to the syntax and to all these principles. But to really master these principles, it's going to take more than just the lecture and the afternoon project. So that's why this week, a lot of the project time this week was devoted to things that we learned last week, because it takes a lot of repetition to learn these principles. So yeah, I think the first time you see it, when you're reading a tutorial, when you're in lecture, yeah, it makes sense. And it makes sense in the context that you're looking at it. The next step is to be able to take that principle that you learned within that context that you learned it and be able to apply that into a different context. And that's where this happens when you're asked to take what you learned in a lecture or a tutorial or some Google search and apply that in a different context. That's where things get blurry. And that's why it takes a couple passes over that material to finally understand the principles underneath it so that you can apply it in a different context. So thanks for bringing that up. It looks like there's a lot of people that feel the same way. Okay, so I don't want to spend a ton more time here, but I will address the red question marks that I see here, and then we will take a quick break. Okay, so in Authenticate.js, does class extends React.component have to be on the next line below const authenticate? Yeah, good question. That is a little bit weird. So let's go look at authenticate. I think Code Sandbox will fix this. It doesn't necessarily have to be. Like, we could do that, but I think when I save it, it'll Code Sandbox will drop it back down. Yeah, it does. Yeah, sorry, the syntax is a little bit weird there. If it helps, you can wrap anything inside curly braces and just return what is inside there. Implicit returns like this definitely are difficult to get used to. Let's see. Okay, does our username authentication need to be on the with authenticate page? I set mine up on the app component. Username authentication. Let's see. Logged in state. Okay. Yeah, good question. So this part here, does this have to live inside authentication? It doesn't have to. I think yesterday we showed that we passed the state checker down from app.js. So you could keep that here inside this state object and then pass it down as a prop. And then you could reference that in authenticate as this.props.loggedin. So yeah, however you want to, that's what's really cool about React is there's going to be 10 different correct ways to build this project. And what I hope is at this point that you can look at a problem and say, okay, this is how I want to manage this state because it makes sense to me this way. And I hope you take that and run with it. And however managing the state makes sense to you, do it that way. That's totally fine. I don't think it's a problem to see it one way and then do it a little bit different way, as long as you feel like you're not breaking any major rules and can get the app working, of course. But yeah, I think it's really cool that you can start now at this point to start branching out, forming your own opinions, and building things how you want to build it and architect it in a way that makes sense to you. I've been accessing local storage directly using dot notation instead of the functions get item, set item. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I would definitely use the functions. I've never seen it this way. I didn't know you could do that. Cool. But yeah, use the functions. They're going to be probably the best way to access that. And that's how you'll see it online and Stack Overflow and tutorials and everything. So Could you briefly go over importing things from other folders? Say you're 4 folders deep and you want to import something from a folder to deep from the root. I've seen a few people struggling a little figuring out how many. Yeah, sure. I think we just showed a good example of this right here. So what I do is when I'm trying to find where to import something from, I look on my sidebar here and I look at the file that I'm trying to import into. So we're trying to import this function into authenticate.js. So what helps me is to close everything else around that and just have those two open. So I'm here and I need to get to here. So in order to get to this utils folder, I need to go to this level. I need to get to my source level from here. So to get to the source level, I need to go out of authentication and out of components. So I'm backing up 2 levels. So I do 2 dots, 2 double dots here. Now at this point I'm out. I've backed up 2 levels, so I'm on the source level. So then I go into utils and pull this function in from checkoff. So into utils, into checkoff. So I literally come over here to my sidebar, close everything, make sure I can find I know where the 2 things I'm looking for are, and then count folders that I have to back out of, close that folder, and count down to where I need to go. Thank you for asking that. I'm sure that's a confusion for a lot of people. Yesterday you said that hooks solved the problem that HSC was trying to solve. Can you elaborate on that or give an example? When we do a hooks introduction, I will get into that. We can look at this from yesterday. Oh, what are we doing? There we go. Okay, so remember yesterday we built this component here, or this project here. So we started out, we were able to build this without a higher order component. We started out by building a title and a subtitle component, and then using the 2 uppercase logic to inside both of these components here. Now this is a very simple use case, but hopefully it kind of answers what, or can give you an idea of what the answer to your question is. So we had shared logic inside both of these components here. And we said we don't want to have copy and pasted code all over our application. So instead of writing the same code in multiple places in our app, we're going to build a function or a higher order component that will extend that logic to both of these components by passing those components into that function. So that's the problem that higher order components solve, that hooks solve. There's other problems that they solve as well, but this is one of the problems that hooks solve. And that is shared logic between multiple components. Now with this particular example, there are maybe other ways to write this shared logic and build that into these components. But higher order component is a way to solve that. But with this simple use case, there technically are other ways we could do it, but this was just an easy way to demonstrate what a higher order component does. So that's the problem that is trying to be solved. Shared logic, or logic that's shared between multiple components. And we don't want to write that logic over and over and over again or copy and paste it into different components. Instead, we write it in one place, and then we pass components into a higher order component, and that higher order component makes a carbon copy of the component you pass into it, extends it with the shared logic, and then returns a brand new component, which is a carbon copy with the extended logic, with the logic extended onto it. But yeah, you'll be able to see this a little bit better with hooks too. Let's see. Does toggling class within a component always involve its changing state? State is active. Yes, yep, it does. So yeah, usually this kind of stuff is handled just in state, and you'll have, we call these flags. So you'll have like an isActive flag. When you hear that term, it usually means a Boolean that's on state that can be toggled back and forth by clicking on something. So one really good example of this is a sidebar menu that you can collapse or open up. So you'll see state.isOpen, and if it's true, that sidebar is open. If it's false, that sidebar is collapsed, and you can toggle that by clicking like the little hamburger menu thing in the top corner of whatever app you're using. So that's an example of a state flag that controls just a piece of UI like that. I love those error messages that React returns, and every time I mess up something, they help me finish my project. Yeah, I would love to do that more. I've been thinking lately on how we could build that into the curriculum. I think that's a great piece of feedback. Thank you. Currently looking into that. Stay tuned. Will we learn React navigation to simplify things? Nope. Ben, you and I are on the same wavelength here. Okay. Hey, let's take a break. And with that, we're going to wrap up our discussion on HOCs. I will proactively point out times that we see higher order components, just so you recognize how often they come up in the industry and why we want to teach this to students, even though it's a really hard concept to learn. So just a heads up, you now know the concept, the basic concept, and when I say, hey, what does this remind you of? You'll be like, oh, HOC, I'm so glad I learned that. Yeah, I'll see you in 5 minutes. Okay, come on back. All right, we're going to close this down. Let's see. Okay. So today is all about styling, and we're going to look at a couple different styling libraries. First, we're going to look at React Strap, and then next we're going to look at styled components. Both styled libraries, both very different in their approach to styling. So the goal for today is, number one, just to see how to use styling libraries in your app, in your applications. And then number two, we're going to focus more on styled components and learning CSS in JS. So let's start by looking at React Strap, which is a library that we can use in our projects. It's a library of React components that we can add as a dependency and import those React components into our project and use those pre-styled components in our applications. So I'm going to open up React Strap and just jump to the front page here. So here is the React Strap docs. By the way, I saw, let's see, I saw Dan jumping in and giving some answers here. Dan is a new employee. He is the program director for the entire web program. So the first 3 units that you guys will go through, he is overseeing all the instruction and all the curriculum and everything for that. So everybody wave to Dan. Hi, Dan. He has a ton of knowledge, so he'll be a fantastic resource for our team here and for the program. Okay, so when you see him answering questions, just know you're getting the best answer that you can get. All right, let's take a look at React Strap. So again, this is a library of components that are styled with Bootstrap. Okay, so to get started, we are going to come down here, and we're gonna follow the Get Started with Create React App section. So we're gonna open up a new code sandbox. So go ahead and open a new code sandbox. And we're gonna have a React sandbox. Okay, so that's basically running Create React App, right? So we ran Create React App. We've started our project. It's fired up right here. So the next step is adding Bootstrap. So we're going to add Bootstrap and React Strap as dependencies in our project. So we need both Bootstrap and React Strap. So if you're doing this in the terminal, you do yarn add Bootstrap and then space React Strap. But for this, we're just going to add it with our add dependency button. So add both of those, React Strap and Bootstrap. Then we're going to import Bootstrap CSS in source index.js. So we highlight this section here. I'll give you this. So we're going to take this import into source index.js. So source index.js, that's this file here. Now, important part here, if you have styles.css, you want your styles to override Bootstrap styles. So make sure that you put the Bootstrap CSS file above your styles.css here. And you can see it's already changing things. Nice. Okay, now we've got the styling. All we need to do is import a component. So let's go look at the component list. So if you scroll back to the top here and click on components, then we've got a list of components that we can import and use in our projects. So let's take a look at buttons here. So how do we use a button? Well, remember that these are simply React components. Just because it's someone else wrote it, and just because it's from a library that we've added as a dependency, doesn't mean that anything is going to change on how we use these components. So we have button components, so we're going to import that component from the React Strap library. So let's go here, and we're going to import button from React Strap. And then just like any other component we would import into our project, we can use that, we can render that component here. So there it is, but we want some text inside there, right? So instead of doing a self-closing component, we'll just add some text in between here. I'm a button. Yay! You have successfully used a React Strap button. Okay, so make sure that you have your button imported and rendering and that it's showing up on your screen. Okay, the next part about this, and this is something that is common with most component libraries or most libraries that you would bring into your project. The next thing we want to see is, are there any props that we can pass down to button that we would want to use? So let's go back to the documentation here. And it looks like there's a color prop that we can pass down with some enumerated values here. So I want you to try out some of these colors. So create 4 or 5 buttons, pass in different colors, and see what happens when you pass in a different color here, a different string to the color prop. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. I'll write your tasks here in Slack. Oh, yes. Yeah, let me give you the Code Sandbox link in just a second. So here's this if you need to fork this sandbox to complete this. Okay, we'll go about 2 minutes, and then we'll let you all show off your awesome buttons. Okay, who would like to share your code sandbox? Let's check these out. Let's see, let me pull this over, Mario. There we go. Does anybody have code sandbox to share? There we go. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, there we go. There we go. I was gonna say, nobody wants 10 points for your Hogwarts houses, huh? Uh-oh, did you save? I don't know if you've saved your code. Jump back on and save it. Let's see, here's one. We'll look at Irving's here. Ah, very nice. Look at all those buttons. So beautiful. Woo! Okay, let's check out, let's see how he built those. Okay, so we've got a list of buttons. We've got the color prop being used to send down these different strings to this component. And a pizza component that I assume would show some pizza inside this button. Oh, pizza, let's see. Pizza's probably, aha, nice. Hey, look at that. So you sent the text down through a component inside this button. Very cool, I like it. Great job. 20 points for your Hogwarts house of choice for that, that neat trick there. Okay, what else we got? Let's check out John's. We'll close this. There we go. I'm a button, yay. Clickable, hoverable. this is what's really cool about using libraries like this is you don't have to go in and write all the CSS for this hover. You don't have to write the CSS. Notice how it's got that kind of highlight around the color that I've clicked on. That's using the active or focus pseudo selectors on these buttons. You don't have to go in and write all the CSS for each type of button because React Strap takes care of that for you. So these kind of styling libraries are awesome to get if you want to have a lot of styling done for you out of the box that you don't have to write. Cool. Great job. Let's take another quick break, and we'll look at just a little bit more with React Strap, and then we'll jump into styled components. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more things here. Let's see. So we're going to, I did want to take a look at these because these are a little bit different. So Chad used a block level button. Let's go see what that is. Oh, look at this. So we've got some more props being passed in. Nice. Let's go take a look at these. So we've got color. We've got a size prop that we can use. So we're using size. This is just a regular button, a small button. We haven't used a large button yet. Let's try a large button. Size large. Whoa. Big button. Both of these red buttons are using the outline prop. Remember, if you see a prop like outline or block that isn't passing a value in, it's pretty much the same as passing in true. So passing in outline by itself is just saying outline equals true. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That was what I was going to cover next, is that in the docs here, the first example just shows the color, because that's what most people are going to use a button of the regular size and just use the color. So that's the first example here. But if you come down here, they give us their prop types object. So we can take a look at all the props that we could possibly pass in to a button. Most of the time you want to pass in an on-click. Sometimes you want to pass in a size. Maybe sometimes you'll pass in disabled or block or outline. So in the documentation, you can see all the different things that you can do with these buttons that are pre-built into these components. Sorry, I should probably zoom in there. So here's an example of outline buttons, and all you do is pass in the color that you want it to be, and then outline equals true. Sizes, we have large buttons and small buttons. And again, the size that you want. Block level, like Chad showed us. Active state, let's see. What does active state even do? I don't even know. Disabled. So you can't click on these ones. They're disabled. Let's see. Close icons. We won't get into some of those. So yeah, thank you very much for showing us those examples. That's also what's going on here in Wills, are the different colors and then the outline prop used there. So this is a good question. The only import we need is import button. That's if you want to import a button. But what if we want something like a carousel, like someone mentioned earlier? Then you would import all of these, the carousel, carousel item, carousel control, carousel indicators, carousel caption. So buttons are very simple. You just import one component, bam, it's right there. Things like carousels or forms, you have to import a lot more components, and then you have to know how to compose those components together. So take a look at this form. We've got a form built here, and the code for this is a form that's imported from React a form group, a label, input. Notice that all of these are capital letters. So these are the components that you have imported from React, or React, excuse me. So all of these, option is not a component brought in from React, it's lowercase o. But you have to know, if you want to build some of these more complex things with the pre-styled components from React, You have to know what you need and how to compose them. Usually what I do, honestly, is I'll grab this entire import. I'll put it into my component. It was yelling at me because I was importing button twice. Then I will grab the entire form. So that I make sure that I have all the pieces right. Now there's my huge form that looks exactly like theirs. Well, let's say I don't want any radio buttons. Then I just find where the radio buttons are. And that's probably, yep, right here. So radio buttons. So I can get rid of this entire form group. I don't need a text area, so then I get rid of the text area form group. And I just kind of whittle it down till I have the pieces that I want, and then I start filling in the values that I want. Something like this select multiple. This component, these options I would probably have in my data as an array, and so I would delete all of these, and I would wrap this first option, I would wrap one option in a map over my array, and dynamically create options, option elements inside a map. Same with this section here. So it looks complicated when you're looking at it right here, but it's actually pretty easy to just paste their format into your app, and then kind of whittle it down, take out the pieces you don't need, and go and then start building from there. Okay, awesome, great work on React Yay! There's a lot to explore here. Obviously, there's a lot of different things that you could be importing and using from React. So have fun exploring that. Let's take a look now. We're going to transition to styled components. So we're going to go to styledcomponents.com. Yeah, so once you've imported something, you can use that however you'd like. And then just know that any, let's see. Just know that any component that you would import is going to have different props that you can use. So once you import a component, start learning about that component, look at the props you can use, and then look at their examples in the documentation. Okay, I'm going to close these. And let's open a new code sandbox. This is fun. This part's really cool. A lot of students love styled components. I want you to open yet another new sandbox here. Don't start anything yet. We're going to just go line by line in the documentation and learn about styled components. So, we ready? Let's do this. Styled components are visual primitives for the component age, since we all know exactly what that means. This uses the best bits of ES6 and CSS to style your apps without stress. Okay, we're going to come right down here. We're going to learn about what all of that means. So here we go. To download styled components, we need to install the dependency, and that's it. You're now ready to use it in your app. Okay, that sounds simple enough. So go to your new sandbox, add dependency, and we're going to do add styled components. By the way, when I learned about Max, I think it's Stoibert, that the author of this library, he's like just out of high school. When I learned that, I was so mad at myself for not being at his level of awesomeness when I was in high school. Why couldn't I have done something cool before I was in my 30s? Come on. That's okay. All right, so we've got styled components in our application. Yay, we're now ready to use it. Hooray. So we're going to add our first styled component. All right, let's say you want to create a simple reusable button. That sounds useful. A reusable button component that you can use throughout your application. There should be a normal version and a big and primary version for your important buttons. This is what it should look like when rendered. This is a live example. Click on them. Whoa, the normal button, primary button. Cool, yeah, let's learn how to make these. First, let's import styled components and create a styled.button. Okay, I'm going to import styled from styled components. So let's do that up here. All right. Next step, create a styled.button. Whoa, this is some weird syntax happening here. Hey, we're just trusting the process. So let's create a const, capital B button, and we'll do styled.button plus 2 backticks. All right, hope we know what we're doing. Button equals styled.button, backtick, backtick. What the heck? Oh, lowercase button. There we go. Okay, sure. Let's see what this is. This button variable here is now a React component that you can use like any other React component. Let's see if that's true. Let's go into here. I'm just going to delete this H2 and say hello styled components. And so they're saying that this is now a component that we can use like any other component. Hey, look at that. It created a button. That's pretty cool. Let's go read a little bit more about this. But take a second first before we continue to catch up to this point in your apps. Okay, so let's go back because we've got some weird stuff going on that we want to learn about. This unusual backtick syntax is a new JavaScript feature called tagged template literal. You know how you call functions with parentheses like this? Well, now you can also call functions with backticks. What? Okay, hold on. We're going to click on this link here. So we've got a function called myTag, and we're calling that function down here with this string here. There are some crazy things happening here, but we don't have to worry too much about this syntax because you'll see how we're going to use this in styled components in just a minute. But this is really cool. So you can kind of see what, you can take a look at this documentation and kind of see here inside the my tag function what's going on. Okay, cool. So all we're doing here is calling a function. All right, that makes a little more sense. So style.button, we're calling a function. Okay, I can kind of see what's going on now. If you render our lovely component now, just like any other component, this is what you get. It renders a button. That's not a very nice button, though. Sad face. We can do better than this. Let's give it a bit of styling and tickle out the hidden beauty within. Yeah, let's do that. Let's tickle that hidden beauty out. So I'm going to copy this, all this styling here, and I'm going to paste it into my backticks. So there's that block of code for you. Yes, it does. Good question. You do have to, a lot of times you'll use a library that you're, a third-party library. Not a lot of times, but excuse me. Sometimes you will use a third-party library that gets deprecated. Hold on while I get a drink of water. I think I'm okay. Whew. Okay, so yeah, sometimes you'll be using a library that gets deprecated, no longer supported, and yeah, you have to change your code and use a different library or use some other solution for that. So unfortunately, this is true, but that usually doesn't happen too often, so we'll be okay. Okay, so let's jump back into this. We've got our code. We're going to drop our backticks down and throw that code inside here. Oh, look at that. We tickled the inner beauty from within into our button. Nice. Tickle out that hidden beauty within. As you can see, styled components let you write actual CSS in your JavaScript. So this is the cool part about styled components. And this is why a lot of people are jumping on this train. A lot of React developers will preach about doing everything in JavaScript. JSX is HTML in JavaScript. Styled components is CSS in JavaScript. And there's a lot of people that are excited about these kind of patterns. There's also a lot of people on the other side of the boat that want to keep everything separate. So personally, I like doing Sass. I don't like styled components as much, but a lot of React developers have really enjoyed styled components. And there are some really powerful things you can do with styled components here. Okay, this means you can use all the features of CSS you love, including, but by far not limited to, media queries, pseudo selectors, nesting, etc. The last step is that we need to define what a primary button looks like. So we've built out this button here, but we want to define now what a primary button looks like. So let's do that. To do that, we also import CSS from styled components and interpolate a function into our template literal. And do what? Okay, let's take this one step at a time. We're going to import CSS from styled components, like they've done here. So go back to Code Sandbox. After style, you do comma, curly braces, CSS. Okay, perfect. So we've imported that. Now let's go read what the rest of this weird sentence said. Import it and interpolate a function into our template literal. Okay, so the template literal is the backticks, right? So everything in between our backticks is this template literal. When we interpolate something inside a template literal, we are using the $ curly brace syntax to write some JavaScript inside here. So the JavaScript we're going to write is a function. So we're going to interpolate a function into our backtick template literal here. And that function gets passed the props that we would pass to our button. So let's take a look at this function. Here we're saying that when primary property is set, so if we've set a primary component like this on our button, or prop, if we've set a primary prop on our button component, then that gets passed as props.primary. So inside this interpolated function that receives props, we say, is props.primary true? If it is, then change the background to pale violet red and change the color to white, like this button here. So let's add this interpolated function. I'll give you this code here. And we're going to add that to our styled component. Now we're going to create a new button. And all we have to do is add primary. And that changed the styling. It's so cool. Mind blown. So to recap what happened, what we did is we created a button component with this styling here. Then we added the functionality to say, if we add the primary prop, we're going to change the background of our button to this color, and we're going to change the color of the text to white. Pretty awesome stuff. I'm going to jump on Slack, see if we have any questions before we take our last break. So under the hood, is it taking this stuff in the template literal strings and exporting it to a CSS, minimize file, or something? Yes, it will compile it down. Let's open this up here. And let's go look at sources. So we want to okay, so here's our index.html, and this might be done. Okay, hold on, let's see if this is in here. Oh, here we go, styling. Okay, so this is the styled component styling that we've added. It did inject the styling for these buttons that we've created. So let's go look at our buttons here. And let's see what we have. So we've got this first button. If you notice, both of these buttons have this styled component SC class on them. And then they both have a different random class name here. So if we look up here, this is all the styling for BDVAJA. So this is all the styling for this class. And we can see that, nope, we don't see that here. Oh, that's because it's in line here, maybe? I don't know. So yeah, BDVAJA, the JJRXO class is styled here. And then this secondary class is styled here. And then this styling is coming from all of this right here. And that must just be, yeah, this is just a reset, it looks like. So this is just a reset. This first SC dash gobbledygook, and then the second gobbledygook is well, it says it's right in here, but yeah, is here inside a CSS file. So great question. Let's see. Yeah, no problem. I'm getting a CSS not defined error. Make sure that you have it imported like this. And then it's a function that we call here to add even more styling for this case. Okay, yeah, this is a good question. So you wouldn't have to make a bunch of different buttons, but just make the different buttons using the props to change the formatting whenever needed. Yes, exactly. Perfect. Why would we go to all the trouble of doing this? Because now we can import, you could put this in its own file, export it out of that file, import it to any component in your app that you want, either this button or this button, and then render a button and give it a primary or don't give it a primary. And then you get these different components rendered. Yes, that is the whole point of this. Nice, love it. So styled components have really weird class names. I was just wondering why, when inspecting Instagram site, they had, that's not just a styled components thing. That is actually common with a lot of different libraries and frameworks and minifying code. So yeah, this is actually a normal thing that you'll see outside of React, outside of components, or outside of styled components. How do you do pseudo selectors with style? Oh, we're going to look at that in just a second. Would you recommend placing all your styled components in one file or in their respective component files? So that's a really good question too. If you have something you want to reuse, then put that in its own file. If you have something that's only for that component, then leave it in that component file. Yeah, yep. Yes. Okay, let's take our last break, and then we'll see a little bit more awesome stuff we can do with styled components. Alrighty, let's finish this up. We're going to, let's see. Yeah, I think this is a very common feeling for students as they go through React. HOCs are very tough. Today is just like a breath of fresh air. Okay, so we're here. We've got our two buttons. I'm going to add a div, and inside this div, we're going to do something else. This is just to drop down. We're going to make one more button, but it's going to drop it down below these two buttons here. Okay, so we built that out. Nice. We're going to go into documentation, and we're going to click on, there's a lot you can do with styled components. We're just like barely scratching the surface here. This is something that you will continue to explore and build and learn how to do really cool stuff. But for this, we're going to go into another example of stuff we can do. So quite frequently, we're going to read the extending styles section. Quite frequently, you might want to use a component, but change it slightly for a single case. Now, you could pass in an interpolated function and change them based on some props, but that's quite a lot of effort for overriding the styles once. To easily make a new component that inherits the styling of another, just wrap it in the styled constructor. Here we use the button from the last section and create a special one, extending it with some color relating styling to make a tomato button, because why would you not need a tomato button? Got to have at least one tomato button in your projects, okay? So we've got our button here. This is the same normal button that we built before. We're going to create a new component based on button, but with some overriding styles. So we're going to create const tomato button up here. Again, all we're doing here with const button and const tomato button is building a component. Okay, keep that in mind. We're just building components that we can use like any other component we've built. Then we're going to call styled, and let's go look at the syntax here. So styled, we're going to call this function one time, pass in a component, and call it again with the styling we want. Hey, we've seen this pattern before. What does this look like? What's a function that takes in a button or takes in a component and gives you a new component with extended functionality? Whoa, higher order components. I told you would see this pattern again. Told you. Okay, let's invoke styled, and we'll pass in button, which is this component that we created up here. And then we'll extend the styling of our button component. So we're going to pass in button, and then there we go. I'll give you this whole block here. And so we've got a tomato button. We're going to go inside this div, and we're going to render our tomato button. Yay, now we have a tomato button, because why wouldn't we want a tomato button? One more thing I want to show you, and then we'll go over the project for today. And that is, let's see. Okay, that has to do with this question here. How do we do pseudo selectors with styled components? So let's come up here to our button. And what we're going to do is use the hover pseudo selection to make these buttons grow by adding a little bit more padding. So padding right now is at 0.25 EMs and 1 EM. So when we hover over these buttons, we want them to grow a little bit. And we do that by this syntax here. So when you nest, this is SAS syntax when you have nested pseudo selectors. You do the ampersand and then colon hover, whatever pseudo selector you want. So when we hover over these buttons, let's add some padding of 0.5 EM and 2 EM. I don't know. This is going to be kind of annoyingly jarring when we hover over these. Oh, it's not too bad. But yeah, still a little bit weird. But a good example of how to use our pseudo selectors in styled components. We can also do media queries. So let's go take a look at media queries. So you just add inside your styling here, inside your styled component, you just add the @media. You nest your @media query inside your component. And then just follow the same exact rules that you would normally follow with media queries. Awesome. I'm going to take a look at Slack, see if we have any other questions, and then we'll go over the project you'll be doing today. Okay, no other questions. Cool. Let's see. I'm sure there is. Nice, yeah. Josh to the rescue. Thank you, Josh. So for today, we're going to be doing the last day 4, the last day of the React Instaclone project. The focus for today is to use styled components to add functional styles to your React components. So your tasks are going to be to replace any styles you've previously written with styled components. That doesn't mean you have to rewrite your styles. You're basically copying and pasting out of your CSS folder, out of your CSS file, into your components inside these styled components here. And the syntax is the exact same as you would use in CSS. So if you've tried any inline styling with React, you probably have noticed that it will look something like this. Oh. Right? So when you're doing inline styling inside JSX, it's a little bit weird, and you have to get used to the syntax. That's what's really cool about styled components. You don't have to worry about that. Same exact syntax that you're used to with CSS. So you're going to be doing that. You'll start with the search bar, refactor search bar to use styled components. You'll use the, this kind of goes along with that for the search bar. Then post container, comment section, you're just going to go through one file at a time and build out your components. Now, one thing I want to touch on that I don't think we talked about yet is, let's say we had some styling for app in our CSS, which we do right here. So how would we turn app into a styled component? So what we would do is we'd say something like const, maybe app div. And this styled object here that we've imported, you can take any HTML element and call dot whatever HTML element you want to create a component. So this app class is on a div. So if we want to take these styles out of our CSS file and make this div a styled component, we're gonna say styled.div, use our backticks. We'll go to the CSS file, we'll take all of this out of here, and we'll add it to here. Now you'll notice that the styling is all different now. It used to be centered because of this, but now it's all pushed to the left. So instead of using a lowercase div with the class name app, we're going to take the class name off of here, and we're going to use app div. Like that. Now we have all of our styling back. So now we're using a styled component in place of that div that we were using before, and we're writing our styles for this styled component right here. So that's the basis for everything you'll do today. Find everywhere you've got a class name that has some styles written in CSS, build a const for that element, call styled.whatever element that is, h2, div, section, button, whatever it is, call styled.whatever, and then paste the styling that you had in CSS right inside here, and then replace the element with your new component. So that is it for today. Well, actually, there's one more thing I want you to do, and that is the second part of this focus is to think about this bullet point here. Why state-driven views and components are useful patterns for scalability, composability, and reuse. So when you come down here, after you finish refactoring, I want you to spend a little bit of time on these 3 bullet points here. These are just kind of some self-reflection type questions. And I think at this point in the React unit, this stuff is really important to look at. For example, now is the time to step back and look at what you've accomplished this week. Start from day 1 README file and see what the tasks were. Think about how you were asked to approach this problem. Think about the different components you built, how you architected everything, and just reflect on how you've grown this week and the knowledge that you have now based on a week ago, or even more based on 2 weeks ago. Read this article about state-driven views and think about why state-driven views are important to use as software developers. So please spend some time on these kind of self-reflecting things. I know that I totally get the struggle of these first 2 weeks in React, but I think after you're done today, going through this kind of easy project, and you've had a chance to have a breather, this is some good self-reflection you can do to realize how much you've grown through those struggles. Okay, so you'll do yourself a disservice if you don't take that time today or maybe sometime this weekend to do that self-reflection. Also, if there's more functionality that you want to finish up in your app that you didn't get to the last few days, spend a little bit of time this afternoon to work on that as well. All right, make sure we don't have any other questions. Oh, good. So we can style custom JSX components, or do we wrap them in custom styled components? Can we style custom JSX components? So yeah, any styling you have in your app, unless it is, let's see, except for icon class names, everything else you're going to change to a styled component like this. So we kind of walk through it with you. If you're if you've got any questions on that, then let us reach out to your PM and we can clarify which way to go. All right, have a wonderful afternoon and good luck in your projects this afternoon and on the sprint project tomorrow. And I will see you all. We've got a Q&A this afternoon, and then we'll have another AMA tomorrow afternoon as well. So have a great day. Thanks.